Oedipus killed his father and married his mother.
Who pays for that wedding?
Have you ever noticed the weirdly high number of movies and shows about lusting after moms and wanting to kill dads? The Oedipus Complex is psychoanalysis founder Sigmund Freud's idea that little boys aged 3 to 6 develop sexual feelings for their mothers and hatred for their fathers, whom they perceive as rivals. It's based on the famous ancient Greek myth of Oedipus, which Sophocles wrote about in the play Oedipus Rex.
It's modeled on the Greek tragedy of Oedipus, who actually did sleep with his mother and kill his father, and when he realized what he'd done, he gouged out both his eyes.
Today, many of Freud's ideas are disputed in psychology, but that's done little to lessen his outsized impact on our culture, or the fact that Oedipal motifs are everywhere in popular films and shows past and present.
Rare Jarrell, and you must be Oedipus Roy.
These stories offer a form of mass therapy, teaching us how to sublimate those universal desires and fears, or showing us the catastrophe that happens if we don't face them.
Son is a poor substitute for a lover.
Here's our take on the Oedipus Complex on screen, and why these parent-obsessed stories shape our relationships more than we know.
This is The Take on your favorite movies, shows, and culture.
Thank you so much for watching and for supporting us.
Please subscribe and never miss a take.
A boy's best friend is his mother.
Freud uses the Oedipus myth not to signify any literal incest or breaking of taboos, but as a symbolic representation of the way parent-child relationships work and influence adult life. It's a common joke that men often end up with women who remind them of their mothers.
I've just realized that you bear a striking resemblance to my mother.
And boys fighting their fathers is viewed as a necessary rite of passage, as evidenced by how much it dominates coming-of-age stories. Obviously, Freud's theory has flaws, most notably that it only really speaks to straight male sexuality. The Electra complex, which theorizes that girls have sexual feelings for their fathers and view their mothers as rivals, was proposed later by Carl Jung, and neither complex is recognized by modern psychological authorities like the DSM-5. Even so, it's undeniable that the father of psychoanalysis's ideas gave birth to a lot of what is modern psychology, and has indelibly shaped our popular discussions and pop culture's dealings with the subconscious.
Ted's father's own fear of failure has caused him to make his son the embodiment of all of his own deepest anxieties about himself.
According to Freud, Oedipal feelings are normal and with age are sublimated into adult, socially acceptable sexualities. In healthy examples, the child's sexual urges for the opposite sex parent are redirected towards more appropriate partners.
So you picked a woman who looked like your mother, so what?
And the child eventually learns to identify with the same-sex parent, while their competitiveness is redirected towards the world at large. But stories that feature variations on the Oedipus myth tend to focus on unhealthy situations, where the sort of mother-son-father standoff described by Freud becomes unstable, and the Oedipus complex may go unresolved. One way this happens is if the mother is possessive, overbearing, or inappropriately sexual, while the father is absent or can't interfere. Howard Wolowitz of The Big Bang Theory lives with his mother, who treats him like a child.
Sheldon sick!
Were you playing with him?
For God's sake, Mom, I'm 26 years old!
Excuse me, Mr. Grown-Up!
On Friends, Chandler Bing has a mother who's unusually open about her sex life, which affects Chandler's sexuality.
You know when you're in bed with a woman, and then all of a sudden, your mom pops into your head.
In both cases, it's implied that the mother's undue influence over their sons is partly the cause for Chandler's and Howard's neuroticism, immaturity, and problems with intimacy. The Sopranos explores whether mafia boss Tony Soprano's feelings of resentment towards his oppressive mother are part of an Oedipus complex when he finds himself drawn to a similarly dark and erratic girlfriend named Gloria.
My mother was just like you. Bottomless black hole.
The series contains the classically Oedipal scene of young Tony witnessing his parents being sensual with each other, which is apparently the trigger of his first ever panic attack. And his therapist, Dr. Melfi, suggests that much of violent, philandering Tony's behavior may actually stem from his flawed relationship with a mother who lacked maternal instincts, taught him unhealthy models for love, and even tried to have him killed.
This deeply wounded, angry being that would let you replicate once again your relationship with your mother.
I don't mother.
Cinema's most iconic, horrific exploration of the link between violence and Oedipal mother-son relationships is Alfred Hitchcock's 1960s classic Psycho. Because of Norman's smothering and possibly abusive relationship with his mother, he's unable to mature properly and is subsumed by her.
His mother was a clinging, demanding woman. And for years, the two of them lived as if there was no one else in the world.
They even share the same name, Norman and Norma. Their contentious, poisonous relationship underlines that the stifling possessiveness of an unresolved Oedipal love for the mother can end up looking more like hatred, an emotion that for Norman is projected as violent anger onto another woman. As cultural critic Slavoj Žižek points out, the 3 floors of the Bates Motel can be seen as representing the psyche according to Freud.
First floor, ground floor, basement. It is as if they reproduce the 3 levels of human subjectivity.
The superego, the kind of inner parental authority, the enforcer, is the top floor, so it is there that Bates talks to his mother.
I tell you, no.
Mother, please.
The ground floor is the ego, and here Bates's rational self is in control. He behaves mostly like a sane person and interacts with others. The dark cellar is the id, or subconscious impulses he can't control. When he tries to move his mother's mummified corpse to the cellar, it's as though he is trying to repress her into his subconscious. Like all great horror movies, Psycho is all the scarier for making the horror element somewhat relatable. To a degree, we all internalize our parents' voices.
Huh, boy? You have the guts, boy?
Shut up! Shut up!
Hitchcock's next film, The Birds, also features a dynamic full of incestuous tension. Here too, the father is absent, while the mother seems possessive and jealous. The mother and son speak to each other like romantic partners.
Darling.
Yes?
When the hero brings home his love interest, the camera lingers on a tightly framed, strangely intimate shot of him and his mother, during which she challenges his new connection. According to Žižek, the birds serve as a symbol of his family's psychic illness.
The violent attacks of the birds are obviously explosive outbursts of maternal superego, of the maternal figure trying to prevent sexual relationship.
Hitchcock uses real but grotesque objects, a mummified corpse, violent birds, to represent the disorder in the characters' psyches breaking out into their reality. Meanwhile, in the films of David Lynch, another director who heavily uses Freudian motifs, it's harder to distinguish base reality. Blue Velvet's Jeffrey is not a child, nor is he related to either of the people he is spying on in this scene, but like in Tony's case, it's the classic Oedipal motif of the peeping Tom situation.
Imagine the scene as that of a small child hidden in a closet or behind a door, witnessing the parental intercourse.
Lynch's sensibility is well matched to Freud's view of the subconscious, as a kind of dream world where one's desires can be projected onto other people, events are non-linear, and dark fantasies permeate everything.
Mommy! Mommy loves you. Baby wants to
The Oedipal mother-son bond takes a grittier, more realistic turn in Xavier Dolan's 2014 film Mommy. Here, like in Psycho, we have a fatherless, mentally ill young man who is disturbingly close with his mother. But this single mother is struggling to help her son through a mental health crisis without access to adequate mental health resources.
Là, tu vas te calmer, tu vas respirer, ok? Puis là, tu vas prendre ton calmant.
And in this context, suddenly it seems as though there are worse horrors than a somewhat unresolved Oedipal complex, such as poverty and a lack of social services and healthcare. This mom and son do act like partners, but this partnership is necessary for their survival in a world that is against them.
On va être une team. Ouais, nous deux. On va apprendre à me contrôler.
Come, Father. Let us embrace at last.
The second part of the Oedipus Complex concerns conflict between fathers and sons. Both developmental psychology and films about teens and young adults demonstrate that parent-child conflict is a natural and even necessary part of growing up. The plot of How to Train Your Dragon demonstrates a healthy resolution to father-son conflict. At first, the hero and his father are at odds, and a rift forms between them.
You're not a Viking. You're not my son.
Spurring Hiccup to go on his own adventure. Through this conflict with the father, the son learns to be strong and resourceful, and in the end, it all works out.
I'm proud to call you my son.
Thanks, Dad.
But as with the mother-son dynamic, Oedipal father-son stories often focus on more unstable situations, where the mother is usually either ineffectual or absent, often deceased, and the father is often abusive. Frequently in Oedipal stories of father-son conflict, a son's anger towards his father stems from the father's mistreatment of the mother. In Guardians of the Galaxy, it's clear that Peter Quill loved his deceased mother very much. At one point, he meets his father Ego, whose name obviously evokes another Freudian term, beneath a huge statue of Quill's mother, symbolizing the way their relationship to her is key to their relationship with each other. But after it's revealed that, spoiler alert, Ego killed Peter Quill's mother,
it broke my heart to put that tumor in her head.
The two become adversaries. This mistreatment of the mother is also key in Harry Potter's conflict with his dark, twisted father figure, Lord Voldemort, who killed the young boy's mother. Lord Voldemort is not Harry's biological father, but he is, in a sense, Harry's symbolic father or partial creator. A part of his soul is in Harry, and this has given birth to some of the boy's personality and magical powers, like his ability to speak Parseltongue.
He transferred some of his powers to you the night he gave you that scar.
For Freud, a young child who begins to comprehend his father's sexual relationship with his mother may not only experience jealousy, but also interpret the sexual relationship between father and mother as mistreatment of the mother, because he does not yet understand what sex is. And Zizek links this theme with the iconic deep breathing of cinema's ultimate dark father figure, Darth Vader.
This deep breathing is the Freudian primordial father, this obscene, overpotent father, the father who doesn't want to die.
Darth Vader's entire life story is full of Freudian motifs.
I am your father.
Firstly, the young Anakin Skywalker is greatly attached to his mother and destroyed by her death. Princess Amidala, who he falls in love with, bears a strong resemblance to his mother. He is tortured by foreboding dreams of Amidala's death, and Anakin draws a parallel between this threat and the loss of his mother.
Like the ones I used to have about my mother, just before she died.
Anakin's desire to save Padme leads him to the dark side, a choice which contributes to Padme's illness and death. And it's striking that in many of these examples, a character tries to avoid a prophecy and by resisting it ends up helping bring the prediction to pass. In psychoanalytic terms, we might interpret this theme to signify that the more we repress and ignore emotional truths, the worse the consequences will be when those feelings finally come out, which they will. At first, Anakin represents Oedipus, but with his transformation into Darth Vader, his role in the mother-father-son triangle shifts. As Zizek points out, the scene of Anakin becoming Vader is intercut with the scene of Princess Amidala giving birth to Luke.
So it is as if we are witnessing the transformation of Anakin into father. A monster of a father who doesn't want to be dead.
In the stories of Voldemort, Darth Vader, and Ego, the idea that the father can only be conquered by his offspring symbolizes the way in which the older generations must inevitably be replaced by the new. The father who fights to avoid being dethroned by his son is really in a losing battle with time.
Of course, you realize by dethroning Dad, you're next in line to be dethroned by Frederick, and then the only thing left after that is death.
And a father who refuses to accept this natural order of things, who desires to cheat death, can only attempt to do so by committing the fundamentally evil act of killing his own offspring, choosing himself over life. Voldemort, incidentally, also killed his own actual father, and in Greek mythology, Kronos, the Titan, came into power by castrating his own father and taking his place. Afraid that one of his own offspring would do the same to him, Kronos ate them, inspiring the famous Goya painting, Saturn devouring his son. Eventually, one of his children, Zeus, survived thanks to plotting by his mother, Rhea, and went on to defeat his father to become king of Olympus. Again, this myth speaks to how each new generation dislodges and replaces the last in an inevitable progression. And, fittingly, in some traditions, Kronos was the god of time. Succession features this same mythical dynamic, but set in the high echelons of contemporary corporate America. The realistic setting provides sharp contrast with the fantastical level of power wielded by the ultra-rich patriarch Logan Roy, who may not be a literal titan like Kronos, but is a titan of industry.
My father is a legend. I worship the ground he walks on.
In the second season, we meet the character Rhea Jarrell. Like the mythical Rhea, who outsmarted Kronos, Rhea Jarrell engages in a cagey relationship and power struggle with the Titan, and thinks about which of his children should replace him. Kendall Roy is the son who tries hardest to escape his father's orbit and replace him, and for that he's punished severely.
My son, that was your best shot. You lost.
When Logan chastises his son for attempting to take over the CEO position of Logan's company.
Historically speaking, when I'm betrayed, it's usually you.
This line also brings to mind the broader history and many, many stories of sons displacing their fathers. In the season 2 finale, though, Logan reveals that in fact it's the follow-through of being able to topple the father that will earn his respect.
Did you ever think I could do it?
Do what? The top job? You're not a killer. You have to be a killer.
So when Kendall at last betrays him again with more success, we actually spy a sly smile on the senior Roy's face. When approaching the city of Thebes, a young Oedipus meets the fearsome Sphinx. She gives him a riddle. What walks on 4 feet in the morning, 2 at midday, and 3 at night? He answers correctly. It is man. Oedipus getting this right shows that in the abstract, though not for himself, he does understand the inevitable progression of human life.
Sophocles made the prophecy unconditional, so it had to happen. It didn't matter what Oedipus did.
But interestingly, in our modern Oedipal stories, the conflict between fate and the individual is often reframed. Instead of the classic Greek tragedy about the victory of fate over individual will, we often see the victory of will over fate.
Well, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Crucially, Freud's psychoanalytic theories helped society transition from the ancient deterministic view of the world to the modern individualistic perspective. Oedipus tries to escape his fate. Psychoanalysis and psychotherapy deal with the same issue. They try to help us change ourselves, and through that change our fates. Oedipus doesn't at first know that the man he's killed is his father or the woman he's married is his mother. And it's this lack of consciousness and awareness that Freudian psychoanalysis is addressing. When Oedipus at last learns the truth, he blinds himself in a frenzy, realizing that although he possessed eyes, in a more crucial sense, he's been blind the whole time. Psychoanalysis and psychotherapy aim to open patients' eyes.
You're locked in a constant battle for identity with your father.
I'm not stabbing my eyes out for any man.
And through acknowledging how much the past influences the future, psychotherapy gives us a way out.
Acknowledging that the tether exists is the first step towards breaking it.
Another crucial difference in modern stories of father-son conflict is that we often see the son's killing of the father as a necessity and a choice, rather than a terrible accident. Often to overcome the dark father, a sacrifice is required of the son. This Jesus Christ-evoking theme of sacrifice as a prerequisite for salvation reflects how Christian motifs have become intertwined with classic Greek myths in modern storytelling. Perhaps the best example of a hero overcoming his Oedipal destiny can be found in Back to the Future.
It's called Mothers and Lovers.
Nah, bro. It's called Back to the Future.
Right, okay, so you saw a movie about a guy who goes back in time and almost has sex with his mother?
The protagonist, Marty McFly, has a mother who seems possessive, and a father who is a pushover.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Think McFly?
Marty's greatest fear, it seems, is turning into his father, whom he doesn't respect or admire. When Marty uses Doc's machine to travel 30 years back into the past, the story takes an explicitly Oedipal turn.
This is more serious than I thought. Apparently your mother is amorously infatuated with you instead of your father.
But ultimately, Marty is able to not only avoid his mother's advances, but also reshape his own father's personality by constructing for him a formative moment of resistance to oppression. When Marty returns to the present day, his altered mother is sober and fit, the family is happy and affluent, and his father is transformed into the kind of confident, fulfilled man that Marty can identify with and aspire to be like the child must do to overcome the hatred of his father. Essentially, Marty accomplishes the thing that many a therapy patient probably wishes they could do. He goes back in time and literally fixes his family thanks to his insights, fixing his own life in the process. In this way, Back to the Future uses sci-fi framing to make psychotherapeutic work a physical reality. Before psychotherapy and psychoanalysis ever existed, stories were our main source of emotional education that helped us make sense of our lives. Viewing these examples in movies can help keep us from walking around blind and unaware of how we're acting out or repeating the past, and instead help us make conscious and intentional choices.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
history is gonna change.
This video was written by friend of the take, Anya Formozva. If you liked the ideas here, you can check out her channel, Q22, for more interesting cultural insights.